This episode of the Local Insider Podcast is brought to you in part by My Patriot Supply. There are two things you can count on when you buy from My Patriot Supply: getting high quality food for the best value and the peace of mind that comes with knowing that you're prepared. The emergency food you'll depend on is made from the freshest ingredients. Meals are freeze-dried and sealed airtight with oxygen absorbers and closed in resealable heavy-duty 4-layer zipper packs for long-term storage that lasts up to 25 years. And they're all made in the USA. By ordering today, you'll have the peace of mind that only comes with the ability to feed yourself and those you love in any crisis situation. We think you'll agree you cannot put a price tag on the personal freedom that comes with being prepared. Visit localinsidershow.com/emergency food and pick up your 2-week or 4-week emergency food supply. Again, that's localinsidershow.com/emergency food. My next guest is from Danville, Arkansas. He currently lives in Paris and he studied at the U of A in Fayetteville. Now he works as the staff chair at the University of Arkansas Division of Agricultural Extension Office. Please help me in welcoming Bob Harper.
Welcome to the Local Insider Podcast, a show about everyday people who make a big difference.
Bob Harper, how are you?
Doing good. How are you?
Doing great. I want to thank you again for coming on the show. What exactly do you do with the 4-H, and how can parents or children or farmers get involved with the 4-H to help you guys out?
My role in 4-H is, I'm the staff chair of the extension office in Logan County, so I'm kind of over the whole office. So I am over Sarah and Charlotte, our other agent. But as far as working with actual 4-H, I work with our foundation. That we have a 4-H foundation, which is kind of what we use to fundraise funds for our county operations. So what we use to send the money we use to send kids to camps and that sort of thing, trips.
Mm-hmm.
I help with the fundraising and help kind of coordinate that foundation. I also work with the kids that show animals and stuff. You know, sometimes I'll go out and if they have questions on, you know, if they've got problems with their animals or if they're having trouble, you know, maybe, you know, just new kids that have never shown or anything. You know, I have somewhat of a show background, so I can help them with that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll also help with some of our natural resources or environmental type competitions we may have. I've coached a team. We had a team that competed at the state 4-H, which was a livestock skill-a-thon. So I also coach some teams and stuff like that. That's basically it.
Well, so it sounds like you're about neck deep in it,
Not as much as Sarah, but some, yeah.
Right. You mentioned fundraising. You know, the Cub Scouts. I was in Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts, and we had the popcorn. I know that FFA has the blue and gold. What are some things that you guys do for fundraising?
We have several. Our number one fundraiser would probably be a letter writing campaign, where we just send out, you know, it's pretty simple. We send out letters to people that have donated over the years and ask for a donation. We do that. Probably our most famous one will be the 4-H calf. We raffle off a heifer every year. We didn't this year because we didn't feel comfortable sending kids door to door. But I'll probably for at least 20 years they've had a calf that we will purchase the calf. We get a donation from Farm Credit of Western Arkansas to purchase for most of the cost of that calf. We go out and purchase a calf from a local producer, and then we will one of the 4-H kids will take the calf and keep it all summer and break it to lead, and and take care of it, and then we'll take it to the fairs and we sell off tickets, and then we'll raffle it off at the end of the fair in Boonville. So that's probably our most famous fundraiser. And then also we do the pullet chain. It's a little bit of fundraising because we make a little money. We raffle off 3 pullets from each kid's flock. We give them 20 to 25 birds, and then that we'll raffle 3 of them off at the end. We can do a little fundraising there. But
and for those people that don't know what a pullet is,
yeah, a laying hen, a young laying hen before they start laying.
Okay.
So you can go to the fair. The pullet chain. Sarah may have talked about that program, but we purchase. It's a statewide program, and our state 4-H will secure these pullets, and then our foundation will buy the pullets for our kids. So the kids get 20 pullets in April. Day-old chicks just hatched, and they raise them up, and then they show them at the fair. They bring them back to the fair, and they can compete to win. Compete in the fair, and then they'll bring their three back and show them at the fair, and then we auction those 3 off. Which it's about the time they're starting to lay, so anybody from the public can come and buy a set of pullets, if they're wanting some hens that are ready to lay eggs.
Mm-hmm.
And normally those hens will bring, the 3 will bring more than what we gave for the chicks.
Right.
So what extra money we make there, that's a little bit of a fundraiser. But people really we have people that call every year because they want to buy those chickens because they're well taken care of, and they're a laying breed, and they're right coming into laying. So if you're wanting to raise your own eggs, they're good chickens to have.
Mm-hmm. So what would be the difference between those chickens and, let's say, the ones you get from a True Value store or at Woods or something?
But they're similar. They're probably, ours are usually bovine browns,
mm-hmm.
Or brown leghorns. So they're going to be real similar. The only difference would be, these are ready to lay. These will be like 5 months old when you buy them instead of having to get them day old.
Mm-hmm.
We get them from a hatchery. Ours come straight from a hatchery, so they have it distribute them like at a fairgrounds. Our state staff does, and we go pick them up. So by the time the kids get them, they're about 36 hours old maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But they've just been hatched instead of where they might have went to a store and been for a week or so. They'd be similar breeds, though.
What's the difference between the laying hens that you buy, like the pullets, and let's say you wanted chickens to raise for meat? Are they the same chickens? Do they just, or is there?
No, they're different. It'd be about like buying. It's about like the difference between a beef cow and a dairy cow. They're bred like all the chickens that they raise at Tyson. Those chickens are genetically selected for the last 40 years, 50 years to gain weight and just gain meat.
I see.
But and the other ones, like you can feed one of these 4-H pullets all it can eat for a year, and it's never going to get very big. It's just going to lay eggs. They're just not made to put on meat. Whereas a Tyson chicken, they don't feed it all it'll eat, because the ones that because they actually will get eggs out of Tyson chickens, to become the chickens that go to the chicken house.
Mm-hmm.
But they can't feed them all they'll eat, or they'll get too fat to lay eggs. They have to kind of restrict them. It'd be kind of like it's like the difference between a beef cow and a dairy cow. You can feed a dairy cow out to eat, but it's never going to get fat.
I see.
And it's not going to get muscular or anything, or it's never going to yield a lot of meat. You can eat one, but it's not going to yield a lot of meat. And it's really about the same with a broiler chicken versus a laying chicken.
So a broiler chicken, that's what the meat chickens are called.
Yeah.
So where do you buy broiler chickens?
Tyson or OK or somebody will buy those. They'll buy pullets from a primary breeder, like an Aviagen or a Cobb, and those are broiler. Those are broiler pullets.
Let's say I wanted to raise some.
Pullets.
If I wanted to raise some backyard chickens, and I had some pullets for laying hens, and then I wanted to raise some for meat, where would I get those broilers?
Oh, you'd have to get them from like Cackle Hatchery or Murray McMurray. You can get them that are selected to be. You can get broiler type birds yourself.
Okay.
same deal. They've just been selected over the years to be for meat instead of, some of them are like a Cornish. Some of those breeds are kind of dual purpose,
Mm-hmm.
but like the breeds that you see like over history, those Tyson birds aren't a breed. I mean, they may have started out with like a Cornish base, but they've just been selected over the years, and they're just whatever. They're not actually a breed anymore. They're just like a meat type bird.
I see.
And you can get those. You can go to a hatchery and get them if you wanted to raise birds to eat. But yeah, you'd be disappointed to try to raise a.
Oh, I know. I'm glad I
ahead.
asked that. I'm glad I asked that question. I would have been. We've been talking about it for several years, but I was thinking about getting a small backyard coop for eggs, and then eventually, the birds would get older and they would stop laying, and just like chicken run, those will be the ones that go in the chicken pot pie. But
Right. Yeah.
But
yeah, and you'd want to put them in something like all the old. I think most of all the old birds that are lay eggs for Tyson them wind up. They used to all go to Campbell's Soup, but I don't know if they do. They may go somewhere now, but they used to all go to the same place. I don't know. If they'd probably go somewhere different now, but they're used for soup. They're not used for chicken,
fried chicken or
chicken tenders or anything like that. Yeah.
So do you have any personal favorites as far as farming? Do you raise cattle or chickens or both? Or
I raise cattle, but I worked in the poultry business for about 5 years when I was out of college.
I know cattle people, they say it gets in your blood, and it's it's one of those things that once you are in it,
yeah, it's kind of hard to get out of.
Right. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but
yeah, I don't know either. It's you kind of I know right now you kind of have to want to be in it to because it's not a whole lot of profit in it right now.
Right, it's not very lucrative.
It's not the best time. No, but we try to help. We do a lot of our programming is with beef producers, and a lot of it's with forage, trying to help them cut their costs so they can try to be profitable.
So let's say that I wanted to start out, and I just bought a house with some land out in the country, and I wanted to start raising cattle. What would my first step be? Let's say I had a house in 40 acres. How many cows could I put on there? What kind of cows? Where would I get them? What would that look like?
First thing, you'd probably make sure you had fencing, and then make sure you had some way to water.
Mm-hmm.
That you had a reliable water source for them before you got any, and then after you had that, and then some sort of facility like a corral or something. A lot of people get all that they get the cows before they get any of that stuff, but I'd recommend kind of at least having a plan for that before you get very many cows.
Putting the cart before the horse.
They're kind of hard to rope. I mean, you can get somebody to come rope them, but it's not. It's better if you don't have to.
Right.
But if you had 40 acres, and if you called me, I would come out and we'd look at what kind of forage base you had to see what kind of grass you could grow, or what kind of grass you had existing, and what kind of improvements could be made. And
so is that something that the extension office, is that a free service to farmers? Or?
You'd call and I'd come out and look at your place. We'd probably pull a soil sample and see how fertile your soils were, to see if you needed any kind of lime or fertilizer. And then we would probably do we'd call it a pasture inventory, and we would see how much grass, what kind of grass you had, and what kind, or how much and what kind, what your weed pressure was.
Mm-hmm.
We'd get your forage deal, kind of get you a plan at least, and that would be one way to start. And then because we would have to kind of do an inventory of what kind of grass you had before I could really make a determination on how many cows you could have.
Right.
Because all 40 acres aren't the same. You could run 40 acres. I mean, we have general guidelines, but one person 40 acres might run more than others, depending on soil type and, grass type, species and everything.
Right. And if, you may have to dig a pond, or if you don't have access to fresh water, or a well or something like that.
Right. Once you got that, as far as getting cattle, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to go about it. I've done talks and did little presentations on what's the cheapest. Some people will buy bred heifers and some people will buy cows or pairs. I mean, some people would never buy an animal from the sale barn and put on their place, and some people do it all the time. I mean,
Why wouldn't they do that?
there's not like, I guess, does it, a lot of them want to, they know what if they raise them themselves. Like once you get in the business, you can keep your heifers as a way people will retain their heifers, and so their cows are the heifers they keep, and they have like a closed herd. So cattle go through the sale barn, they get disease, they could be exposed to disease and bring it to the herd. I have bought cattle before from the sale, but you should quarantine them. I mean, that's been a rule for a practice for years. If you have a herd and let's say you buy a couple of cows, you ought to quarantine them for 2 weeks and watch them before you check them for symptoms and make sure they're not showing symptoms of any kind of a disease before you put them with the rest of your cattle. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
For disease, I mean,
makes sense.
if there's a lot of people that are against that, but there's a lot of people that do it. And like I say, if you kind of follow those rules and quarantine and everything, you can get by with it.
Speaking of like diseases and stuff, how prevalent is the mad cow disease?
Yeah, that's kind of died down. I haven't really heard a lot about that in several years. There will be a case of it every once in a while now, but it's not like front page news like it used to be. It's really not very prevalent anymore. There's probably the disease that's caused more trouble for producers in the last several years. And this is kind of the deal about going to the sale barn now I'll have to think of the name of it. Maybe I'll come back to it, but it can cause cattle to abort their calves, and bulls can get it and spread it.
Oh, I see.
So a lot of times your bull can get it and spread it to the cows, and it doesn't really affect the bull, but then the cows, if they have it, they'll abort their calves.
So it causes like stillborn cattle.
Yeah, it'll cause them to abort. They'll abort probably in the first stage, in the first 3 months. So I mean, the calf's just really tiny fetus.
So like they will never be able.
They can clear.
They'll never be able to.
No, after
calf.
they abort, if you remove the bull, the cows can clear of the disease, but the bulls can never clear of it for some reason. So the bull will always have it. So if you get a bull, if you buy a bull from the sale now, there's a law that you have to keep the bull up for. You either have to have the bull certified virgin that it's never bred cows, or if you buy one at the sale, it has to have this the test. They can test for it, and you have to leave the bull up in the pen at the house until you get the results of the test back, because bulls carry it. They're the ones that spread it to the cows.
You would buy your cattle from an individual, or you would buy it from the sale barn. And so how many cows or bulls would you put on that 40 acres if you had 40 acres?
If you had good grazing and you were going to let's say you were going to buy hay and not plan on cutting any hay off of the place, you could probably run 20 to 30. The old rule of thumb was 2 acres for one cow grazing. But, with good management, you could push that to 1.5 acres for a cow. And then that's probably providing 7 to 8 months of grazing for the cow. And then you're going to have, a lot of times around here, we'll be feeding hay for 4 to 5 months. So you're probably looking at feeding the cow maybe 5 or 6 bales per cow. What you have to buy is a good rule of thumb.
Okay. So when would you feed cattle feed?
Right. Well, beef cows, well, they're the same as dairy cows. They need the most feed when they're lactating. So for beef cows, that's when they have a calf on them. So from the time the cow has the calf, or maybe a couple of weeks prior to calving, that's when she's going to need the highest level of nutrients. From then till the time you wean the calf, it peaks about 3 or 4 months after.
How long does that take?
A lot of people wean calves anywhere from 6 to 9 months, but 7 or 8 is probably more common. So the reason you have to feed them a lot, whenever the cow calves, let's say she calves on March the 1st, you want her to calve on March the 1st every year. So to do that, she's going to have to breed about 2.5 months after she calves. They have to be in good physical condition to breed again, to reproduce. So you have to feed them a lot during that time. They're raising a calf and you're trying to get them bred. And to be profitable, you need them to do that. So that first 3 or 4 months after they calve is really when you're going to have to feed them the most. Let's say if she calves March the 1st, she's going to have grass for a lot of that. She's going to start having some lush grass in April and May, which helps. But if she calves in October the 1st, you're going to have to, around Christmas is when you want her to try to breed, and you're going to have to, supplement her quite a bit then.
So if she calves in the spring, then you don't necessarily have to give them feed, right?
Yeah, you wouldn't have to feed them as much. A lot of times that grass, if it's good and lush grass, if there's enough grass, if she's got enough grass, that grass will meet her. It'll be high enough in nutrients to meet her needs, usually more than hay.
I think I kind of see why people get drawn into this, because it's kind of a game to where you have these variables and you're trying to optimize the output. And so what you're trying to do is do better than you did the last season.
Yeah, in Arkansas, a lot of people have a year-round calving season, so that means their bulls are out, and if the cow comes in heat, the bull breeds her. So they may have cows calving every month. I mean, and then they just catch calves when they want to sell them, But that just, if you're trying to optimize what you're doing, that won't. I mean, it's just hard to do it whenever you have cows calving all year, because you may have one cow that's dry, that doesn't have a calf, and another cow just had a calf. So how you feed those two cows the same? You see what I'm saying? You would have to feed to the highest requirement, and you're kind of wasting money on that dry cow, if you're feeding her just like you're feeding the one next to her that just had a baby. So that's kind of the advantage to doing it. A lot of people don't do it because it is kind of hard to keep bulls up. Sometimes, it's hard to keep a bull in the pen if he's wanting to get out.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things that is a challenge.
So do most ranchers, do they just leave their bulls in with the cows all the time, or only when they want them bred?
The ones that have a controlled breeding season only when they want them bred. So, I mean, they'd only be out there with them, let's say a fall calf, 75 to 90 days. And then the rest of the time the bulls are up.
And how many bulls do you need?
Oh,
how many bulls do you need? Let's
say a good rule of thumb, in a 90-day season, a bull could breed 20 to 30 cows. So if you have 50, you probably need 2. If you have 100, you probably need 4 out there.
I see.
We have ours split. So we'll have, me and my dad we have about half our cows breed in the fall and about half breed in the spring. So we about 75 to 90 days, but we'll use the same bulls. So we might put 2 bulls out there with 60 head in the fall, and then we'll put the bulls up and feed them, for 90 days, and then we'll turn them back out with those other cows in the spring. So you don't have to, that way you kind of get more bang out of more value out of your bulls.
So I guess you would probably have to, after so many years, I don't know what that would be, that you would have to buy a new bull, because right. you can't really keep the bull that came from
right. And some people sell everything. If you sell a bull, could probably, they start breeding when they're 18 months and, limited. But by the time they're 2.5 years, they should be able to breed all they're going to breed. And you could keep them till they're 6 or 7 years old. But if you're keeping, if you're keeping heifers out of them, that causes problems, because you don't want to inbreed those. You don't want to breed that bull back to his daughters unless you've got
right.
Unless you've got 3 or 4 bulls and you've got different pastures, you can figure out a way. And the ones you keep out of that bull, you would breed to a different bull. You can keep them longer that way. But if you have one bull and you're keeping heifers, you're gonna have to you need to change bulls out more often.
And you see a lot of marketing to this. The Angus beef, is there really any difference between an Angus and any other kind of beef?
No, not really. I mean, the Angus to be certified Angus beef, I believe the rule is, like, if they go out to the feedlot, they can certify that lot certified Angus beef. But they're not registered Angus or anything. It's nothing like that. That lot has to meet a certain quality grade. A certain percent has to grade choice, which that means it has to have a certain amount of marbling, is basically what it means. So I think if it's like 60% of them will grade choice, and then they have to be 80% black. So there can be some white ones in the lot, but they have to be a certain percentage black hide and a certain quality score, and they can call them certified Angus beef. And that certified Angus beef is just, that certified Angus beef doesn't mean, that was just something that the Angus Association It's a marketing tool, basically. Other breeds have started that. I don't know their little sayings, but they like Herefords will have a saying, and they all have a saying, but nothing's caught on as well. Angus was first, so, but it's really just a marketing tool. But no, Hereford, I mean, any of them, if the difference with Angus and some breeds, Angus would be frame size. So if you put an Angus in the feedlot, it may get to that quality score at a lower weight because it's a smaller frame. Like if you had a pen of Charolais, you can feed them until they get to that marbling score till they grade choice, but they may weigh 1,400 or 1,500 pounds, where an Angus might get there at 1,250. But man, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference in the steak at that point. If you were eating a steak out of it, you wouldn't know. Angus, they just really marketed better earlier. They were the first on board with the marketing. That really is what it is.
If you're not first, you're last, right? So what's this? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. The Wagyu beef.
Yeah, I don't know that much about it, but they're like Kobe beef. They would be like prime
beef, and they're bottle fed or something.
In the U.S., you have select, choice, and prime, and that's marbling. So how much intramuscular fat, that's the specks of fat in the muscle.
Right.
So prime has a lot in it. It makes the beef more flavorful and tender. The Wagyu beef is like off our. It's off the charts, marbled. It's really fat, I guess is what. Yeah.
I see.
Those animals are been designed for years to be. They're going to have a lot of marbling. Basically, is what it is. It would be like prime. I don't think they get very big, so that's going to be a really prime cut of meat, is what it is.
Another thing that I heard that may be marketing, I'm not sure how true it is, but you see that a lot of these grass-fed, says certified grass-fed beef. Well, all cows and beef are grass-fed, are they not? Unless they're dairy cows, and then they're fed mainly grain. Right?
Well,
am I totally wrong?
Whatever they go to they're grass-fed. Yeah, we'll talk about segments. So you have cow-calf producers. Most of the people around here are cow-calf producers. So they have cows and they have calves, and they raise them until they wean them. Those cows may get some supplemental grain, but like 90% of their diet's grass. And those calves are going to be 90% of their diet's grass. And when they're weaned, they may go, depending on if they're like 700 or 800 pounds when they're weaned, they may go to a feedlot. If they're like 500 to 600 pounds, they may go to what they call a backgrounder or a stalker. And he buys them at the sale, or he or she would buy them and put them out on more grass and maybe feed a little and put like 200 pounds on them. But eventually at like 800 pounds, they're going to feedlots. And those feedlots are primarily like in the panhandle of Texas, Kansas, Nebraska. And when they go to the feedlot, they're mostly fed grain. They're going to be finished on a grain diet. So they're like a corn-based diet for like the last 120 days of their life.
Yeah, but most of their life they're fed grass.
The first year to 14 months, and then the last 4 months, they're going to be a grain-based diet. But they're actually, when they talk about a grass-fed animal, it was actually finished on grass, which is hard to do, because to finish an animal, you got to finish its growing out, and you've got to feed it a high enough level of nutrition, and it's getting fat, that's developing actual fat. So that's why they use corn to do that, but it's hard. So if you're going to grass finish a beef, it takes longer, for one thing. And you have to have really high quality forage to have something with enough nutrition to get an animal fat. So yeah, it's different. I mean, they actually finish them on grass. Would you hear that term?
Is there a benefit to that? Is it better for you, or is it just better?
I don't think it's better tasting. I think it's probably more like it's kind of marketing. It's more like a perception thing, I think, like for environmental friendly. It takes longer. So anything that takes longer in a way it's less efficient. But, most of the grain, the row crops that are grown in the U.S. go to feeding animals. I guess if they were grass fed, you would cut down on some of that in theory, but it's pretty hard to finish them to get them to the level that people expect when you go to the steakhouse, you want a certain, you want an animal, you're used to an animal that's finished, that's actually at market, ready to be harvested at a market level. It's hard to get them there on a grass diet, compared to a corn-based diet.
Let's say I had a cow, or do they butcher both cows and bulls, or do they raise bulls for beef?
Yeah, but that's a good point. They raise bulls, but they castrate. Let's say 90%, 90 to probably 99% of all bulls are castrated when they're.
And then they become a steer. Is that right?
But they also usually at the sale it'll be like 60-40. So at the feedlot, there's probably 60% steers and 40% heifers, and that 20% is what people kept for cows. So producers may keep 10 to 20% of their animals back to be future cows, and the rest of them, they get treated just like a steer. I mean, they become a market animal, and a lot of producers the cow calf guy will will castrate those calves when they're young. If he doesn't, they're going to get castrated at some point. They're not going to put bulls in the feed yard. The only bulls that get slaughtered is like,
because that's a recipe.
Yeah. And a lot of the heifers, what they call, I don't know, they're basically spayed. They'll spay those, kind of like spaying calves. They'll do that to those heifers when they put them in the feed yard because they feed better, and they're not, dealing with the problems that estrus causes.
Right. The moon cycle.
Well, those cows, they would harass each other in the feedlot if those heifers were in heat constantly. Yeah,
I see. Lots of drama going on in the feedlot if they did. So
the animal, like the meat that you're probably eating at McDonald's, is probably old cows that are been culled out, and bulls. So they don't get fed. They go from somebody's house, and then they go straight to the slaughterhouse. They're ground into hamburger, old cows and bulls.
So it'd be an old bull, like after the 6th, 7th year or whatever, and he's not.
They go to hamburger meat.
Producing calves.
And the ones that go to the feedlots would be, most of them would be cut into steaks, and your high quality cuts of meat, because they don't want them to be, after they're, I think, 24 months, the older they get, the meat quality goes down. So most of those animals are probably killed 16, 18 months old and harvested.
Mm-hmm. What is veal?
Veal is fetuses right before they're born.
Really?
Yeah. That's why they call it milk. They call it milk fed veal, but I think it's before they harvest those fetuses before they're born. Pretty late term. But
oh, that's terrible. That's terrible.
That's what it is.
Yeah. So another question I wanted to ask you is, how has the COVID cornholio virus, how has it affected the supply chain with respect to the beef and cattle industry?
Well, it hurt the price to start with last year, because of beef, a lot of beef, and a lot with other, but beef probably more than chicken. Depends on restaurant. You buy steaks at restaurants, so whenever people quit going to restaurants, it did hurt the price, and it kind of backed up. They had a glut of cattle like in June and July that they were kind of behind on killing, because they had to shut down a lot of beef plants for several days at a time because they couldn't get enough workers because of COVID. So that hurt. So you had a glut of cattle that weren't being slaughtered because the plants were closed, and then you also didn't have a good market for them because people aren't going to restaurants and buying these steaks. That's kind of a double whammy.
So is there any truth to the videos that you would see on TikTok of a farmer saying that, I just had to euthanize like 600 head of cattle or something like that? Or was that all just fear mongering?
I don't think that happened, really. I mean, I guess it's possible, but I don't think that would have happened. I mean, they can just keep them. I know there was feedlots, were full, but they can just keep feeding them. I mean, they if they have a target weight of 1,350, but they can keep feeding them and kind of hold them back, and they wouldn't have just euthanized 600 head. They just push their dates back. I
see.
They just get them a little bigger when they kill them, when they harvest them. There's a lot of flexibility. The poultry industry, like if you're a certain plant is geared up to run a certain size bird, and that's basically all they can do. without a lot of
Mhm.
change. But I think the beef industry is more flexible. They can accommodate different sizes a lot easier. So
I
so
see.
if they're behind a week, they just hold those cattle and get them later. Especially because they can, especially at the feedlot, it's a little more, their own feed and but once they work through those, the stocker end's real flexible. They're just out on grass, so
Mhm. That was my thinking. If I had a bunch of cows, and I guess you take them to the sale barn to sell them for that, or do you produce for, let's say I'm a cattle rancher and I produce for a certain, I'm trying to think of
yeah,
not Conagra, but
we're not to that point yet in beef. For the most part, there may be some big ranches that are like integrated, like Tyson, but no, they still mostly will go through the sale barn or a private treaty, but they're still
I
going to
see.
go to a feeder that would sell them. Usually, a feeder, somebody else would get them, and they would sell them to Tyson or something.
So the market on the beef is more compartmentalized than it is on poultry, where you don't have these factory farms with beef like you do
Right. Yeah.
um, pork and chicken, where they produce for OK Foods or for
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
Cargill.
They call it vertically integrated in the poultry business, where the company owns the feed. They provide the feed, and they own the birds. Like, you never own the birds if you grow for OK. It's their bird. You just grow for them. All you own is the housing, basically. The company kind of owns that deal. They hatch the chicks, bring them to your farm, and feed them and everything, and then they come get them. But yeah, cattle. I mean, you own the cat. They're your cattle, and you can go wherever you want to with them. And there's lots of different ways to sell them. People can retain. There's a lot of different different ways cattle are marketed. I mean, it would take a long time to talk about that, and I don't know all about that. But there's several different
Right.
ways that people market cattle.
So if I was going to raise a cow to slaughter for my
Mm-hmm.
family, let's say I wanted to slaughter it and put it in my freezer, what age would I do that, and how would I finish it? And you said it needs to be finished on corn or whatever. What would that
All right.
process look
Well,
like?
first thing you'd want to get an appointment, probably. I mean, maybe not you'd have a while with a steer, but I mean, you're pretty far out on your wait time right now at local slaughter facilities. So you'd want to call and make sure, because you may be 6 months out. You may be 6 to 9 months out right now from having a spot. Yeah, if you're going to buy a pig right now, a feeder pig at 30 or 40 pounds, and feed it to 250, I don't know that you'd be able to get it in before it got to 250 if you got the pig right now.
Wow. So you couldn't just slaughter it yourself and put it in the freezer?
You can do that. You couldn't sell that meat, but you could do it yourself. I would recommend getting one that was weaned. So it would be, let's say, 7 months old. One that had, if I was going to get one, I was going to get one that had been weaned like at least 30 or 45 days and it had its vaccinations and stuff. So when you get it, it's not going to be trying to tear out and it's not going to be getting sick. And then I would feed I would probably provide it good grass or hay, depending on what time of year it was, a little bit, but then I would feed it I would start out feeding it 1% of its body weight in grain. So let's say if it weighed 600 pounds, I'd probably feed it 6 pounds of grain and then let it eat however much grass or hay it wanted, And then I would do that for a couple of months, maybe a month or two, and then I'd probably up it to like 2% of its body weight in grain. So, at that point,
Mm-hmm.
maybe if it weighs 800 or 900 pounds, it's probably getting close to 20 pounds of grain.
Wow.
Well,
So
they
they
would
grow
gain
that fast.
when you get
Wow.
it up there like 800 or 900 pounds and it's eating 20 to 25, 30 pounds of grain, they're probably going to gain in the feedlot. They'll gain 3 pounds a day. You're out here, they might gain 2 pounds a day. So if you got a 600 pounder, you'd probably get it. It'd probably take you almost a year to get it to. If you got 2.5 pounds, if you want to take it to 1,200, it'd probably take you 300 days or something, maybe. Yeah, they're going to be like 15 months old when they get to that weight. So if you get it when it's 7 or 8, you're probably looking at 10 months at that.
Wow.
So I'm thinking how much I'm trying to come up with a figure in my head of how much it would cost. But if that calf may average 15 pounds for 300 days, may eat 2 or 3 tons of feed in that time. maybe 2 tons. You're probably looking at
Wow.
$500 to $600 a feed. You may have to give $700 or $800 for the calf, and then it's going to cost you about $400 to get it processed. So you're probably looking at, but
Golly.
if you can get the calf fed, slaughtered, and bought for like less than $2,000, normally a calf they charge. The way slaughtering works, they charge you on dress weight. The dress weight is what when they cut the head and the hide and they gut it. That's normally about 65% of the weight. So if you had a 1,200 pounder, it's going to dress 800, let's say, and that's what they charge. They charge you so much per hanging weight, they call it, to process it, and it's normally like 65 or 70 cents a pound. So if you had a 1,200 pounder and it hung 800, you're probably going to pay $500 or $600 to have it processed. But you're not going to get 800. You're probably going to get about 65% hanging weight, but the total cuts of meat that you're going to get is about 40 to 45% of the weight. So if you had a 1,200 pound steer, you took I'd say you're probably going to get 400 to 600 pounds, but probably about 500 pounds of meat. But like I said, if you had $2,000 in it, that's pretty good. If you can get 500 pounds, because hamburger meat's over $5 now, and you know what steaks are. So, I mean, you actually could still.
It's still when you say it like that, it still sounds really expensive, but I guess it's not if you break.
I mean, yeah. If you tried to buy 500 pounds of meat, it would cost you more than that. Because of that, let's say of that 500 pounds of meat, let's say, maybe 350 was hamburger meat. That's probably, even at $4 a pound, that's 1,400, and that leaves you with 150 pounds of steaks for what, $500? And you know how expensive steaks are at the store, so that's probably at least half price steaks there. So
$7 to
you're probably looking at having $5
$7 to $9
a
pound.
I mean, it's good. The problem would be, you'd have a year tied up in that too.
I saw a YouTube video, and I guess there is a processing place in Arkansas that actually people can take their cattle to, and then they market it. They slaughter them and they sell them like online or something. Am I totally off base there, or is that legit?
That's legit. I think
operation?
As long as you can sell the meat, as long as those facilities are USDA approved, and most of them are USDA approved.
So what would be the benefit of doing that? You would get to know the rancher or the farm, or would it?
Well, for the farmer, if a farmer was doing it, I mean, you could make more money that way than selling them. Instead, if he could get $800 or $900 for the calf, and then he winds up and spends, another $800 or $900 feeding it and processing it, but he may divide that out and sell hamburger and sell all the steaks and stuff. He may sell it for $2,500, so he makes an extra $500 a head on it or something.
I see.
The problem is, there's limited capacity for that right now in Arkansas. So if he had 10 of those, it'd be hard to get a spot to get somebody to actually be able to slaughter that many, right now. Because that's kind of what people are going to. People, that's kind of the hot thing people are wanting to buy local like that. But the problem is the capacity.
What really turned me onto it was I was looking for a locally sourced beef. And I found a place, but they were so backed up with orders that, they couldn't.
And I think that there's supposed to be, I don't know the exact details, but there's supposed to be some grants coming out to try to maybe get a few more of these local slaughter facilities going. But it's a pretty, getting USDA approval and everything is a pretty kind of arduous task, you might say.
Right. They said essentially what has to happen is the USDA has to hire another person just for your facility, because every processing plant has to have a USDA person.
I don't know about the small ones. If I think maybe, I'm not for sure they have to have one dedicated to that plant full time, but they probably have someone that may service several. But like it, big facilities, there's probably several USDA people in each plant, like chicken plants and stuff.
Yeah. I remember when we had Cargill here, there was more.
I'm not for sure if
USDA person.
Let's say the slaughter plant in Scranton I don't know if they have a full-time USDA person there or not. I would think maybe one person could go. But there's a slaughterhouse in Scranton. Trying to think of it. It used to be Fox. Fredericks.
I see. Oh yeah, I have heard of that. And there was one in Waldron, Lassiter's.
Yeah,
was
I'm
it?
not for sure about that one.
I don't know if it's still there or not.
See, there's not. There used to be one in Danville when I was a kid. There's not now. There's one in Centerville. There's one in a lot of people. There's one in Ozark and there's one in Rudy, but there's not as many as there used to be. But I think maybe we might see some of those open up. Some of those old facilities may, because I think that might be a quicker way to get USDA approvals to use a facility that was at least at one point in compliance. So hopefully we'll see some of those open back up, maybe under different management. But I think that might be easier than trying to start from scratch, and build a new one.
Right. If anything good could come out of all of this, I think it's we're starting to get more artisans and more locally sourced food.
It's definitely
because of the supply chain issue.
And there is like USDA stuff with meat. There is a lot of hoops, but there's not that many. Like on vegetables and produce, there's not that much. There's not that many regulations. If you're under a certain amount, I think if you're selling over $25,000 a year worth of produce, there's a lot of regulations. But if you're under that, it's really there's a little bit, but it's not terrible. I mean, it's doable.
Right.
And you can, if you have produce, you can pretty much sell it now. I mean, you're not going to have a hard time selling it.
So what about dairy? What about dairy? Do you think they'll ever get back to?
No, not really. Well, maybe small, because they changed some laws about selling raw milk, I believe, in Arkansas several years ago. Of course, don't hold me to this, but I think you can sell some raw milk. You just can't process it into certain products. I think you can sell maybe milk or cheese, but you can't sell. You can go to a farmer's market and sell milk. You can't go sell like a cake you made from milk or something. I don't know, but something about cottage laws. But
that's strange.
So that kind of dairy could come back. Commercial dairies, probably not.
Yeah, we had 4 around here when I was growing.
Yeah, before I was in Logan County, I think there was supposed to be 150 or 200 dairies, and I think there's probably several factors that led to the end of that. Probably scale.
Right.
I don't think it's just in it here. Small dairies just kind of got forced out all over the country. These big dairy, the profit margin got smaller. So in order to stay in, you had to get bigger. So if you couldn't get bigger, and around here, everybody had smaller farms. And there was a lot of them, so they couldn't really get bigger. So it was hard for them to stay in. The big companies, if they're making less per animal, they just get more animals, and spread out their costs, because a lot of their costs are fixed. So if you have more animals, you can spread those costs out. That was probably one thing. And I think another problem is dairy industry was way ahead on like genetic improvement. I mean, they've been doing AI for a long time, and those cows just got to giving a lot more milk. So 50 cows, or at least 60 or 70 cows would give what 100 would give maybe like 5 years before that. So it just didn't take as many cows. The dairy, the demand for milk wasn't going up, but the cows were giving more milk. So, because I know that, from time to time, the market will be flooded with milk, and they would have, like in the early 90s, they would have a buyout where the government bought a lot of these cows and had them slaughtered to try to help the price, because there was so much milk. And they bought those cows, and they got rid of all those cows, but the milk production hardly went down, because the next generation, they were just improving that much. So it just doesn't take as many cows to produce that much milk, and that's part of the problem. That's part of the
right. When you say AI, you mean artificial insemination. I don't want people to think that they're putting not artificial intelligence. We're not putting artificial intelligence in our.
No, they artificially inseminated them, but yeah, so they just got to where they were giving so much more milk, it just didn't take as many cows. And that was would be another factor probably. And another one would probably be, a lot of small beef people have jobs, and it's kind of hard to have a job and run a dairy, because it's more labor intensive. You got to be there in the morning, milk them in the evening, and
It's a full-time
Right.
job in
A
itself.
lot of people, even with chickens, can grow chickens and still have jobs. And whereas a dairy, you kind of have to be making a living on a dairy, or you're not going to have one. So I think those probably led to and I don't know if that I don't know if those things will change any. I mean, they might sometime, but I don't really see that happening anytime soon.
Mm-hmm. So where do you see the as far as agriculture? What big changes do you see for us here in the River Valley, if any at all? Do you think things will get back to normal, or do you think they'll improve, or what is your outlook, your personal feeling?
I don't think there'll be huge changes. It seems like the cattle market, was high 5 years ago, and it's fell, and it's been pretty static, or static to lower for the last 3 or 4 years. And I just don't see it going up a lot in the next 2 to 3. I don't know if maybe some of the smaller producers, maybe I would think that we might see some of them get out. But it does kind of get in the blood. But I mean, it's just really not very profitable, and right now, especially with small numbers, I think we may see some of them go out.
Don't take your stimulus and go try to start a cattle ranch. Is what you're saying?
The cattle herd in the U.S. increases and decreases, and it should have decreased when the price fell, but it did, but not as much as they thought. Because if somebody does, if a small guy, let's say a guy with 20 or 30 cows sells out, somebody with more cows is probably going to lease that place, and they're just going to put more cows on it. So you wind up with bigger producers, less producers. And it's kind of been going that way for several years, but I guess I kind of see that trend continuing maybe. The only thing that would make that not happen is we are getting some kind of diversified farms where a person may have 20 cows, but then he may have bees and he may have a truck patch, and sell produce and stuff. And I'm seeing an increase in that. If a guy's doing 5 different things, then he can make a living on the farm. He doesn't need 1,000 acres to make a living. If he's selling eggs and he's selling produce, he might sell some kind, if he's got strawberries or something high value, people having these diverse little farms where they do several different things and can make a profit on 4 or 5 different things instead of just one. But getting started on one of those is hard. But there's people that have done it, and once you get started and you get a niche market, I mean, you do really well at it. Those people have to be good marketers of their products, at least to get started. But once they do it, a lot of them are really successful. And I could see that. I could see more people doing that, because I think the market, there's more people that want that.
Right. There's a certain novelty of knowing, the person that your food came from.
Right. At the school at Danville, now they got approval and slaughtered. They have a school farm at Danville, the FFA does, and last year they served some of their beef in the cafeteria. I think they were the first one to the state to do it. Yeah, they got approval and they got them. And
wow,
it was a pretty big deal. Like, I think, some government people came and stuff, and it was the first one in the state to do it. And they said the kids loved it. They thought it was cool.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
We work with there's several producers around that sell produce to schools now, or some. We have meetings and try to promote it. It's really easy to sell produce to schools, and schools love buying local produce and serving their kids if they can get enough people to buy from. Oh yeah, all the local school buyers. We've had meetings with our local school purchasers, the cafeteria purchasers, and they all want to buy local. The problem is a lot of times, most people grow their stuff in the summer and school's out, so they may not be buying as much in the summer, which a lot of them have school lunch programs in the summer also, but they're not as big. They're not feeding as many as they are during the school months. And then most of that stuff, it has to be fresh. I mean, they can't hold it. They can't buy it and hold it for 2 months and then serve it. So,
right, unless it's potatoes or something, which isn't really that feasible. Potatoes are cheap anyway. So how can people help you? How can people get more involved in 4-H and with the extension? And
well, I mean, if your kids, just getting their kids involved in 4-H is what we try to do. And to get, you can just, if you're interested in getting your kids involved in 4-H, you can call our offices. We have one in Boonville and one in Paris, and we can get them signed up. But we're still not having meetings yet. Is the problem? We're still not having meetings for COVID. So, but you go to a meeting, and we have 3 or 4 chat clubs in South Logan County and 3 or 4 on the north side, and just kind of let your kids go to a meeting or something and see what they like. I mean, it's not just a livestock club anymore. 4-H used to be like a livestock, but that we have shooting sports and all kinds of wildlife clubs and art club. Do photography. We have people that compete in photography. We have people that compete in the livestock stuff and still show, but we do a lot of shooting sports, and we do there's cooking, and you can pretty much, and you can make a project out of anything in 4-H. So we have camps, and whenever we get going again on summer camps, we'll have a few summer camps in the county, but then the state they have a camp every week in the summer that you can go to, and they may go, it'd be from like a backpacking tour to a young entrepreneurs camp to, basically anything you're interested in, they're going to have something for it. So,
really, that's amazing.
I
did not know that.
We have a center. It's about like the FFA center. Couchdale, Ferndale is outside of Little Rock, and that's our state 4-H center. And it's a really, they've got a ropes course. They have a really good ropes course, and they have a lake and shooting facilities, all kinds of stuff.
I was doing some research last night, and I found out that in Boonville, the Marcel Phillips Park is actually named after the lady who brought 4-H here. I don't know if she brought it here, but she was here for like 10 years doing 4-H, trying to raise awareness in canning and stuff like that. And she, I guess, gave the land over to the city or sold it at way below market value. But yeah, I was reading her story, and she said that it was a struggle at first because she couldn't get the women to really buy into the idea. But once the daughters were interested, and then the mom started getting to become interested.
One of our 4-H awards is named after her, I think. Seems like one of the awards we give every year is named after Marcel Phillips.
Yeah, it was right at the turn of the century. It was like 1909 to 1920 or something like that. It was whenever she was here, or when she was most active in 4-H. So yeah, if people get your kids active in 4-H, hopefully we'll be able to have meetings soon again.
Hopefully, yeah. We're kind of limited on what we can do right now, like everybody else. But
it's all. I guess you guys have virtual meetings, like Zoom meetings or something like that right now, or do they just?
Yeah,
just not.
We're having
doing
some
anything?
of those. But as far as us, like if producers, if anybody that's got got land or something, they want to do something, call our office. We're still making visits and everything. Our offices are locked, but you can come in and we can, we're at the courthouse is open now, so you can come in and see us. But we're still making visits, so I'm still going out looking at farms and everything.
Even if you have a backyard garden and you see that you have a sickness coming through your garden and it's killing all of your pepper plants or tomatoes or whatever, you can reach out to the extension office and they'll come and see what's going on and help you correct that.
Yeah, we're still doing all that. So yeah, that's right. If we have our soil samples are free, plant samples are free. So if you have something, if your tomato curls up and dies, we can send it off the lab, and within that week we'll have a diagnosis. If it's a disease or something, that's free. The only samples we charge for would be like forage samples. If you want to get nutrient analysis, that costs. But we have a hay show during the summer where they're half price. So, but yeah, and all our visits are free. So you come out, there's no charge for us to come out and visit or anything. So yeah, all they have to do is call.
One thing I would advise people against is if you get seeds in them, do not plant them.
I think we may have had the only. We had the best. I think we may have had the only ones that actually grew. Maybe I heard they had to come out. That the plant board came out and got them. I heard destroyed them.
Yeah, they had to remove them. Yeah. Oh man. Well, I can't say that I wouldn't have done the same, but I don't know. I probably wouldn't have. I probably just threw them in the trash. But anyway.
Yeah,
I appreciate you coming on, but I really appreciate all you do. And again, folks, if you if you need help with your cattle ranching business, you're running into a problem, you can't figure out what's going on, reach out to Mr. Harper, Extension Office. They'll be happy to help you. They can point you in the right direction.
Yep.
Gardens, farming, produce, chickens, you name it. They can help.
That's
out.
right.
Well, Bob, I appreciate you coming on, and look forward to maybe have you come back
Yep,
on
that
again
sounds
sometime.
good. Well, thank you for having me.